Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, George.
How are you?
Good. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. Hey, I'll get those recordings posted.
Please.
Sorry. It actually slipped my mind. So,
Drinking from the fire hose, huh?
yes, very much so. But good thing, right, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So we've got some really good stuff going on, and I'm excited. It's weird. I'm on my iPad. Yep, okay, that's where the camera is. Oh, I'm gonna make eye contact with your face. I'm not quite sure.
It's okay. I don't even pay attention anymore. I'm just as guilty of it. I have three screens. My center one is a 48-inch screen.
Okay.
And two on the side are 24-inch, but rotated vertically. So
that's cool.
my eye tends to wander because it's almost like a wraparound. I keep separate things on each one. So
I've been working off of an iMac here, so I'm going to set up one additional screen, and I know I can extend it to either my MacBook or my iPad. But yeah, two screens is a minimum of two screens, the way to go.
I used to use the MacBook for a long time when I used to do a lot of traveling, but it just I don't know. I can't get the platform doesn't work for me. I did something blasphemous. The reason I did it was I used to travel quite a bit, and one time I had my laptop. I had to make a presentation in front of the Minister of Finance for whatever one South American country, and when I put my laptop through security, they cracked the screen. So I couldn't see what was going on anymore. It was a whole headache to be able to find cables for an external monitor, figure out where I was, and set up the presentation. And one of the guys I was with, guy's name was Enrique. Anyways, he said to me, you should, if you had a Mac, you just walk into the store and they would fix it for you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, I have a data issue on one of my hard drives. We went to the local, it was in Argentina. We went to the local Apple store. And in 10 minutes, they swapped out his drive. I said, I'm done. So I went and bought myself a MacBook at the time, but I ran Windows on it. And I remember the look on the guy's face when I brought it in for servicing. He was like, what? Who does this? That's when you could, that was the time when you could still get the floppy, not the floppy, the CDs for loading, installing Windows. Anyway, so I had it like that for quite a long time, and then once I stopped traveling, it was simpler for me to go back to a regular Windows.
I went slowly down the Windows hole. So I'm a big Chrome, Google. I think they do a really good job, and I needed a new computer, and I was really tired of. I was switching from, I made the mistake of going back to a Windows world, and that did not work for me at all. So I'm like, hey, well, forget it. I can do Chrome on a MacBook. And I've actually been really happy, but I've gotten sucked in. I used to have an Android phone. I now have an iPhone. I have an what I called iMacs in my office. And, but I do everything inside of Chrome because there are no extensions for Apple, right? So all the stuff I use has a Chrome extension. So I run Chrome on the MacBook, but they're bulletproof. I had my last one that's how I got into it. I got given an iMac when I started with Core Value, and I'm like, well, great. So you guys work on, I'm happy to do it. That's how it happened. And that one lasted 11 years, though, with really no loss of computing power. So anyway. To each their own, but they definitely have their limitations. For example, you can only run two screens, and with the iMac, you can only run one additional screen. So,
listen, for me, it's the age-old VHS Betamax thing, right? No question, Betamax was a better quality product. VHS just made it more accessible to everybody, and I think it's pretty much the same thing over here.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're, for me anyways, unless you're a developer or someone in the artsy fartsy field, I don't understand why anyone buys Mac product, but I guess, it's trendy. It's good, whatever works, right?
Works. They're light. They actually have a new 15 and a third inch MacBook Air that I'm trying to actually get Sydney. Because she's in film, she needs she wants the big screen. And but her computer must weigh. She has an iMac, the biggest iMac Pro, the MacBook Pro. The thing must be 4 pounds. It's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah. So, hey, did you switching topics completely? I sent over the document that describes how calculating strategic capacity is related to a calculation of value. Did you have a chance to take a peek?
I saw that you posted something, but I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Okay, I think it may be what you were looking for. So I've written 2 documents. One is, and they're carefully researched. One is the relationship between strategic capacity and company specific risk in, for example, a DCF calculation of value. And the other is a disclaimer, and it leverages NACFA's disclaimer for use of core value. And I went and did some additional research, looked at the ASA standards. I looked at the ABV, the AICPA standards, and tied them all together. And just a disclaimer as to what the calculation of value is and what it isn't. And then it meets the standards for a calculation of value as that is defined in the professional ethics of the professional standards of these 3 organizations. Okay. So that's kind of step 1. And then I have a white paper. I've got to stop creating things. I've got a white paper about done on the same topic, just expanding on with better citation sources and expanding on those 2 are sort of a page and a half.
Is that based off of our discussion last week? Is that, or a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and then what I'm going to do, Joseph, is I'm going to put together a blue ribbon panel of evaluators, and I'm going to have them, test it. Let's see what okay, guys, how does this accuracy? People with, 143 letters after their name. Some people in our community, some not, but have them just do a regression test. How does this look? Take some of your evaluation cases and do a regression. Paul, do a regression test.
Good morning, recovering lawyer George. I say that because when I got a couple of emails with all this legalese about, it sounded like I was supposed to sign that I agreed that Clarity was not a true valuation, and I was accepting that as a member of Growth Drive. Or was I supposed to give that to all my clients and have them sign it?
So that's a great question, Paul. So what we wrote is there's a relationship between every value.
George, why don't you just address the question that I asked, and maybe they'll understand where it's coming from.
So the question that Joseph asked was, well, Joseph, actually, why don't you restate the question? I got to be a good moderator. Why don't you restate the question?
Okay, so it wasn't specifically a question. It was addressing an issue that in a previous product, part of the ability to represent to clients that the numbers that are produced, whether it's in the range of values or the company specific risk, was, had a stamp of approval, so to speak, from NACFA. So even if they didn't understand the components and how it came up, or even either one of us didn't understand, how the scoring went and how the results are produced, you had some authority that would be able to stand behind the numbers that were produced. And I felt that it was potentially something that was going to be a challenge for us when we sit in front of our clients. And I guess, prompted George that he should try to alleviate that if there was any way possible. And I guess that led to the next step, which is
Yeah. So I did
recovering
a,
legal life.
And,
Yeah.
and yet the only number that matters is what somebody will pay you. Doesn't matter what we do with
Oh.
those calculations.
Well, it matters very specifically to Joseph, but Joseph has a very unique and I think powerful business case, business model. However, so it's a two-step process. The first thing I did is I said, okay, well, how does strategic capacity relate to a calculation of value, right? And what are the, let's look at a leading methodology, for example, discounted cash flow. And inside discounted cash flow, there's dark matter, right? There's a bit of a, it's not a black box, it's subjective. It's the evaluator says, well, given my training and given what with the research I've done, the company specific risk, the discount rate based on the company's specific risk for this business is X. And so how do we get away from that subjectivity? And I make, I guess, the argument in that piece that using a standing set of business principles, right, removes, if we apply those principles to valuations across the board, we remove the subjectivity. And I'm being very careful to not say inaccuracy, but the subjectivity of the discount and therefore the calculation of value. And so that's the first piece. So it's drawing the relationship and making an argument that by using a set of standards, we can actually improve the quality of evaluation. And I want to be very careful, and I'll make eye contact with the camera right here. The NACVA has not endorsed in any way clarity, the clarity strategic capacity analysis. They did endorse the product formerly known as core value when it was available in the market. And clarity is not core value. I never had access to the black box there. I do not, put a gun to my head, put a gun to one of my kids' heads. I couldn't tell you how it calculated value, but it was darn good, right? It was darn good. And we believe that clarity is very good. We know that we have the range of values down, right? That I'm highly confident that we have the range of values. Now, the question becomes, how accurate are we at judging where this business falls within that range of, well, within or outside of that range of values, based on strategic capacity. And if we use strategic capacity as frankly, as a more comprehensive way and standardized way of measuring company specific risk, I know I'm getting pretty arcane here, but the one thing that core value did not do, and that clarity does do, is measure value capacity, right? So we can have a business that is doing really well, that is generating predictable free cash flow, that is growing at a has a record of growing and a promise of future growth that we understand and in which we have we have confidence. However, that does not mean that the business has value capacity. And value capacity comes down to the ability to transfer that value in a private accessing the private markets, private capital markets, through a recapitalization or some other vehicle. And so step one is to say, okay, listen, this meets there are two documents. The one is strategic capacity can be seen as an improvement on subjective company specific risk, assessments of company specific risk. Step two is then, well, does clarity meet the definition, the standards for a calculation of value, as that term is defined by three organizations, the ASA, the NACVA, and the AI CPA through the VS 100 and the ABV credential. So, and it does. That's sort of step one. Step two is now to say, okay, well, let's run a series of a cohort of valuations, right? Completed valuations. Let's run them through Clarity and do a test. Establish the degree of accuracy. So core value said within 5 to 10% of a formal valuation. What is Clarity's? What is our rank, right? How close do we come to a traditionally executed valuation? And that's the next step. And that is unfortunately not one that can happen overnight.
I think one of the better things that Clarity does compared to core value, since I still have access to both, is that we can put in the multiple with Clarity, because with looking at VC and PE reports over the last 3 to 6 months, the multiples have suddenly changed from 9 or 10x to 6x in a number of different industries.
And we take a very conservative approach to, I would rather, for purposes of this exercise, I would rather we take a very conservative approach. So, for example, for manufacturing, the top end of the range of multiples in our black box is 6.01 times EBITDA. And in the document that I wrote, the legalese, we're very careful to say this is, first of all, you need to use normalized EBITDA, and we give a brief definition of what the heck does that mean. And this is a normalized trading range, meaning we have attempted, or we have not attempted, well, we have attempted and I believe succeeded in stripping out the premiums that private equity pays in a frothy market, that private equity pays for size, that private equity pays for quality, and the private equity pays for strategic reasons. Strategic deals are their own animal. Those do not belong in this conversation. Now, we can figure, well, so that's where we are. I am hugely confident that, and that's the feedback I'm getting from you guys, that for purposes of Joseph's business model aside, for purposes of our work, for having a conversation with the business owner to educate them about the range of values, about where they fall in that range of values, inside of it or below it, and why Clarity does at least a passable job. I'm really pleased with the feedback I'm getting. So,
George, I'd like to ask Joseph. Joseph, is your need and intention to use a valuation tool?
No, I'm not using Clarity as a valuation tool. I use it as a baseline tool for how I price my engagements with my clients. And in that sense, there has to be a way to have an understanding or an agreement on any type of value that's produced from the product. Even a range of value, let's call it.
Even of a range. So a range is helpful. So George, the previous tool was a valuation tool that was validated compared to a database. And there was a couple of articles that were old that showed the validation proof on that.
Yep.
And that the results from that.
Well, I'd forgotten about those. Yeah, there were a couple of white papers from.
There were a couple of white papers that were old. They showed within 15%. So it really wasn't a valuation tool. It was an estimated valuation tool that results then were used to determine what gaps existed to close, to grow the business, to achieve greater valuation. What you've created is different. You're looking at the majority of our clients that want to grow their business purposefully. That's their objective more than any other objective. Yeah, it could be a few others, but mainly to grow their business. and that there is capacity measurements in doing that strategically and value in growth. And the key word is, have you defined it as you have, capacity, the capacity to be here and to have potential to go somewhere else higher,
Yes.
strategically and value-wise, and
Yeah.
do so within a range that creates a story for us to tell and link back to Joseph. How then do we go from that to proposal and profit for us? So
And-
there are different
absolutely, Larry.
purposes.
Absolutely, Larry. And you know what's funny? We always talk about the delta between the late, sort of the value today and the value tomorrow.
Mhm.
But I would make an argument, and it's up to each of you to chew on this. But I would make an argument that if you have a business that would be worth 12 million at the top end of the range of multiples, right? And today it's worth 6. Let's make, whatever, pick a number, 8. That our work going from 8 to 12 is the return on investment for the business owner. I'd love to discuss whether that is how the fact that they still couldn't monetize that 8, right, figures into. So the valuation may say 8, but that doesn't mean that that they can sell it at 8, and they in all likelihood still cannot sell it at all, because that 8 is based on growth capacity. And when we come in, they haven't made the purposeful link between EBITDA and transferable value. And when we come in, so we're taking a house, right, that can't be sold because it doesn't have a septic system and, whatever. And we're saying, okay, well, listen, sure, your house is worth, $800,000, but without a septic system, nobody's going to buy it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to help you put in a septic system. We're going to make sure it's to code and the spec, and we're going to blah, 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 put it in a kitchen. And we're going to make your house worth, like the one across the street, 1.2 million. And then we're going to help you sell it. So, but our delta isn't the 400,000, but because the 800,000 couldn't be monetized. It's the same with a business. I mean, that 8 million in all likelihood could not be monetized. And so should we or should we not be compensated for the totality of the value? Now that maybe that's at a slightly lower number. Maybe I would get, maybe I would get 1% of, shouldn't I get 1% of the entire asset? If I, through my expertise and hard work, have helped you turn that 12 million into, I'm losing track of my numbers.
The real estate agent's getting 6%, so.
Of the whole thing. And the investment banker is getting 6% of the whole thing. And frankly, what a good investment banker does and where they earn their money is take someone with moderate value capacity and increase that value capacity. They make sure that they drag you through due diligence, right? And because clarity has color of due diligence, it has color of financial audit, has color of quality of earnings. And so is there an argument to be made that we should be getting, like the investment banker, like the real estate agent, we should be getting 1% of the total? And that, I'm just putting that on the table. But as I was working on that first document, I'm like, and I'm looking at value capacity, I'm saying, well, gosh, these guys are actually turning the impossible possible. And shouldn't they get, can they make a bona fide argument? Listen, I've got my lawyer hat on here, right? Can you guys make a bona fide argument that you have earned 1% of the total? So, and that's,
George, Steve has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I'm on my iPad, so I did. Hey, Steve, I didn't even know you were on the call. Steve, fire away, man. I'll get off my high horse.
What am I, chopped liver?
Yep. Hey, Steve, how are you, man? Good morning.
Outstanding. So just a couple of comments. One, I wish our favorite CBA was here, Ed. Comment number one. Comment number two, I'm not sure I ever believed the 5 between, within 5 to 10% of core value, but I never dug into it.
Can I comment on that? Just
Sure.
with all respect to the people who developed that. I'll just use one example. First of all, NACFA did a year of due diligence on core value, and Parnell didn't do it. Parnell gave it to he created a blue ribbon committee, and that committee chewed on it, hammered on it, et cetera. And they came back saying, this really is quite accurate. And so we are willing to endorse it, not as a replacement for evaluation, but as a way to make value actionable. Very cool. The one that I love though is KeyBank. Every year, KeyBank Private Bank was a customer. Every year, KeyBank would do an accuracy test. They do a half dozen transactions that their clients had closed, and they would run them through core value. And the last time they did that, the average deviation, and these are on middle market transactions, the average deviation was $100,000. So that black box is bloody accurate. And frankly,
Well, I certainly
wouldn't
believe,
mind having it, but
Yeah.
we don't. It's someone else's
I
property.
mean, just the financial calculation, X times EBITDA is, pretty straightforward and hard. So I could understand that being perfectly accurate. Ed could multiply X times EBITDA. Clarity or some other tool can multiply X times EBITDA. The fuzziness, and that's the thing that's really questionable in my mind, is all of the the characteristics that allegedly affect the multiple, and that one's challenging to me to believe. One last point with regard to Joseph's issue, and I understand his issue to some extent. Perhaps the absolute value is not vitally important, but the relative movement from day one to day X is the critical factor.
Well, and clarity, and guys, we'll do a walkthrough later this week. And I'll put that on the board, and it'll be recorded, and so if you can't make it, no problem. And it's going to be a chalk and talk. I mean, you'll be able to ask questions at the end, but it'll be a chalk and talk. The clarity shows the total value by growth driving objective, and it also identifies the trapped value by growth driving objective. But the whole thing, always pointing back to growth capacity and value, and we're focusing here on value capacity, your ability to monetize that value, right? And go ahead, Steve, please.
I was just going to say that example where you forgot the numbers, you had something that was worth 8 million and it wasn't monetizable. Then I'd question whether or not it ought to be worth 8 million if it's not monetizable.
Well, that's exactly right. And if you look at the range of values chart, and there's another, my machine keeps telling me I'm trying to raise my hand. I'm not trying to raise my hand. Thank you, iPad. If you look at the range of values table in Clarity 1, we get at that. It's like, listen, sure, there's 12 up in this corner, but 0 is where you land, my friend, because now there are, and then what? And there are other options. Okay. If you don't want to do the work to make your business sellable through an M&A or similar transaction, then maybe we should be re-engineering the business to be an ATM, and we should be plowing money into your Morgan Stanley account, into your UBS, your Raymond James account. Tuck it under your mattress. Go ahead, Steve, please. By the way, just interrupt. You don't have to put your hand.
Just another extraneous comment. There, as you know, there's umpteen ways to do evaluation. One of them is asset value. So if you've got a business that is not monetizable because of some weird not weird, but some qualitative characteristics, it may have a boatload of assets which translate to a big value just based on asset value. Just by the way.
Sure.
I had a mother who, I don't know if they were Asian or what they were, but they had a business. They owned basically an end block in a good section of Portland. And then they had a executive search kind of company. We went through the valuation of the executive search company, it was worth nothing. But that property was worth several millions of dollars. And so they ended up just, daughter didn't try to build that business because it wasn't worth anything. She went off and did something else, and mom commercialized the property.
And not to, the calculation of value is important. The ultimate measure of business success is in the value of the business, one way or another. However, clarity, growth drive is all about driving growth of the business, growth of profits, and making the purposeful link to value. But it is not a valuation. We are not a valuation business. We are a free cash flow growth system.
Yeah, there's nothing in it that gives the property value of property, nothing that gives the value of any equipment. If you're a CNC machine tool company, tooling costs, inventory, none of that is factored into Clarity.
It's not factored. Go ahead, please.
No, Paul, I agree with you that it's not included, but let's be very blunt. The value of a company is really composed of two components. There's the tangible and intangible assets that are being worked on. The tangible assets, likely you're not spending your time working on it, and that's not where your expertise is coming in. Your expertise is coming in to fix the intangible assets, which is the company's IP, how it operates, how it runs, how it grows, how it brings in business. That's what you're valuing. You don't really care about the assets of the company. You can always just go to the financial statements, extract that out and say, this is the value of your company plus whatever tangible assets you have, or net tangible assets. You could do it that way. The reason I brought it up, for George, was how do you value the work that you're doing for a company? And there's got to be a mechanism for you to measure what is the value output or the value creation with your interaction with the client. So for me, it's fine. I don't need a valuation on the company. I need a valuation on the work that we're doing. And there has to be some agreed method between myself and the client, how we're going to measure that value creation. That was the point.
Great question,
Absolutely.
Joseph.
Yeah,
Joseph,
that's a great question.
that is a great question, and one worth us as a community helping each other with. Absolutely.
Because that's my business model. That's how I charge my clients. I don't charge, I charge them a small monthly fee, because if they don't have a skin in the game, then they're not going to really be focused on doing the work. But I charge a percentage of the increase in value on the, on the business. And if I don't have something that we can both agree on in terms of being a reliable number on the value of the company, then there's no way to,
So if
charge
I,
them for
I
it.
understand that, but even within Clarity, the answer to every one of the 25 questions is a range of answers. And if you take a leadership team, that not everybody on the leadership team is going to agree on what the answer is to every 21 of 25 questions. So how do you deal with that there's still a lot of subjectivity in those answers to those 25 questions?
Fair question. Yeah, go ahead. Go, George.
Get agreement with the guy that's writing the check.
Well, guys, there are two ways to do this. One is you can use Clarity Level 1 for a senior leadership alignment workshop. And you should, you should. If you were going to get deeply involved, I would recommend, the CEO's perspective is one perspective, and you've heard the old saw, there are three sides to a story, and the middle one's the truth. We need a wider perspective on the strategic capacity of the business, and we need the senior leadership team to reach consensus on the strategic capacity of the business. If they are going to work on increasing, are they going to work on together on growing profits? And I get into the whole, 5 dysfunctions of a team, but we need to have an effective senior leadership team, and they need to be aligned, and they need to be agreed, and they have to agree, and from one man's perspective, on where the heck we're starting this journey. And if we can't have consensus, so you can use Clarity 1 to do a strategic, a senior leadership alignment workshop, and you can use 2 to facilitate the deep analysis of the business. This is a strategic analysis retreat, a strategic capacity retreat, and have the senior team carefully pick, those of you who just went through the facilitation workshop. Thank you for your comments, Paul. And go through the deep analysis, which ipso facto, right, will be a consensus analysis of the business. If everyone's in the room and we can only pick one answer, we're reaching consensus. I hope that answered the question. I also would like to underscore something that kind of pulled together something that both Paul and Steve said, and Paul, Steve, and Joseph said. If you look at that, we do finance. Finance is covered in each of the 3 dimensions of growth. And at the end of the day, in the transferable value, you look at those questions, we will have, if we do the work, we will have an accurate balance sheet. And that accurate balance sheet, and now we are considering the value, the total value of the business. And that goes into what are we going to sell and what's someone willing to write a check for. That's kind of, so it doesn't consider those assets, but it does if we're going to get a high score, you have to have, if you're going to have a high score and be able to approach a transaction, you have to have credible financial reports, including, maybe most importantly, the balance sheet. So
I have another phrase for clarity. That's
please.
It's a de-risking tool.
Yeah.
Right. People pay for companies or anything else based upon the amount of risk involved. And if you're using a tool like Clarity, and you're actually using it, then you're de-risking the business.
Yeah, you're creating confidence in future performance.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Paul, just to answer your question, I think in a slightly different way. The discussion we're having now about this specific topic, this is one element. I was really addressing to George the ongoing development of the platform and direction I would like to see it go, as opposed to expecting this is the solution to all the problem. In context of the lead generator being developed and whatever, I had a conversation with George about what I felt was more valuable to us than a lead generator. And these are the kinds of topics that I brought up to him, and one of the results was the discussion on why I would like something that has the context, something that addresses the context of how can the client and I agree on the performance that or the value that we're creating for the client.
Absolutely. And Joseph,
one element.
To be I wrote copious notes, and I have them, and they are being strongly considered. I love your suggestions, and they're good, thoughtful suggestions. And give me time. That's my, give me time. Lead generator is very easy to develop because all we're doing is we're creating a clone of survey and client intake and populating a report. The report, the calculations are all there. It's just a different display of the level 1 report. Without, there's no value in that. Lead generator is meant to intrigue people. So I know it has a lot of, I could go on about lead generator for a while, but it is not it's a lead generator. It's not a serious, it's a serious tool, but it is not designed. It's designed to spur strategic wondering, thought, intrigue. And I suppose one could start creating a strategic plan, a growth plan out of it. But you're starting to get, that's like staring at a tree and saying, look, a boat. Well, it can be one day. There's a lot between here and there. So yeah, man.
Well, as we just talked, I had a business owner who's a client already, who was a core value person.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're 6 months, 8 months later, using Clarity One. And it never stuck because you didn't hit the submit button in the report. So when you get to report, scroll down and hit the submit button. I know that that's been an issue with some, and I think, George, you said that's going to be going away eventually. But
It is.
I look at all of this more holistically, and I like Joseph. You got me thinking about how do we value what we do based upon the tools. I think a big differentiator holistically is not just this as a tool, but comprehensively with the 3 dimensions of growth and how all this fits together as a roadmap. The previous tool was just a tool that created an output. That output could have included bang for your buck action items, but they weren't integrated together in any fashion at all. And we had to integrate it. Now with the 3 dimensions of growth, this is layered, both strategic growth and value at a capacity level within those 3 dimensions, depending on the goal and the needs. It stimulates conversation. And I think that's the art of where we need to get better and keep learning from each other, the art of holding that conversation around the use of the tool in the context of where the client's at and where the client wants to go and how we help them get there. So I think that's when I hear our conversations, I think a lot would be solved if we're answering Joseph's question from a self-business standpoint, but also improving the art of using the whole 3 dimensions of growth and the tools that support it.
Yeah. You know, Larry, you raise an interesting point, if I might comment. You know, we know that there's 62% of CEOs want to grow, right? And 21% want to make their businesses easier to run, and 17% are preparing to sell. And my guess is, because those numbers didn't change meaningfully over time, you know, they float up and down a percentage point. Well, we use those as our standards for evaluating what will a client want. And if they want to grow, that's where the 3 dimensions of business growth is so powerful. If they want to grow, how do we prioritize our work? Where do we start? And honestly, where can we end? I mean, if they simply want to grow the business, let's not get into core value would recommend an audit. And you know, I would throw you out on your ear. If you came in, I said, I want you to help Larry grow in my business. You say, yeah, George, you should get an audit. I'd be like, you know what, man? All right, thank you. Thank you for your time. And I'd probably be yelling at you that I want a marketing program. Well, that's probably not the smartest place to start either, which is where the prioritization that is embedded in the system.
I look at this a little more simplistically from the 3 dimensions of growth. So there's a segment of every industry that are called managers who are turnaround artists.
Yes.
Okay. So first thing you do, that's where a predictable cash flow comes from. That's the turnaround. Then a turnaround artist, the next thing they would do, they'll get you started on a predictable growth path. But they will be gone when it comes time to transition and do the value, because they don't like that part. They like the turnaround part. So the 3 dimensions of growth fit with the turnaround, the growth, and then the sale of a company. And there's 3 different groups of people typically involved in making those stages happen in a company.
So I'm going to throw out there 2 very inflammatory comments. Number 1, none of us can help our client grow. What we can do is help the company's strategic capacity to grow. You don't control markets, you don't control what's going on in the world, so you can't do anything to help them grow unless you're going to tell them you're going to sit there and do the sales for them and bring in the clients. So that's number 1. And what we can do and what we can control is the intrinsic value of the company, meaning the structural, the organizational elements of the company that allow them to have growth. That is directly related to valuation and market multiples. And that's why when I approach a client and I talk to them about this, it's an absolute certainty, right? I know if you do A, B, C, and D within the context of valuation, the way valuation works, this is the value that's going to be added to your company. this is what you're going to pay me to do the work. Does that make sense? Does a 10x work for you or not?
Yeah, and
So
I
it's very
understand
easy to
that's
do
not,
that.
that's not inflammatory to me, but that works well with your particular business model for how you approach clients. But for me, I'm very focused on a particular industry where I have a lot of expertise. And so when I'm going in there, I'm doing more than just giving them capacity. I am directing them that, oh, the goal is over there, not over there. You're going in the wrong way.
That's still capacity.
We could argue that one. Or at
You're
least
not,
discuss
you're
it.
not actually impacting their growth. Because you're not doing any specific action that is actually growing the company.
Joseph, are you referring to the difference between, I mean, I think if I understand you correctly,
You're not an employee of the company.
you're having
in the
you're having a
operations.
strategic impact, not a tactical impact.
But
Correct.
part of what I do is also I may be on their board. Now, a board member may have incentives that are directly related to their growth, which gets back to
Fair
your
enough.
original question and comment of how do I get paid for the work I do? And a board member may be very well incentivized to make sure that it grows.
So the only other thing I'll throw out there that, something for food for thought, so to speak, in a world where there's a sea of people who talk about growth and, making the company better and the impact, and thousands, if not tens of thousands of coaches out there, how do you differentiate your offering to a client? EOS, they've got the answer. Then you've got the Profit, whatever, that has its own, its own answer. Everyone's got an answer to the solution of the problem. But at the end of the day, how does a client able to make a choice as to which is the right path to go? And I think the offering in terms of a very clear-cut return on investment for what you're going to advise them and guide them with, obviously, a basis or data that that has resilience, like, if you're talking about NACFA or whatever. So then there's a conversation or relationship that can be built on elements of trust, because your interests are aligned. You're going to get paid when they grow. Okay, they know exactly how much you're going to get paid. They know it's going to be the return on their investment. You're now thinking like the business owner, as opposed to some guy outside who's, yeah, I've got the answers to everything. I'm the smart guy. I'm the expert. I've got all the experience. You should be listening to me. My personal experience is that business owners don't want to hear from experts. Experts usually are wrong and they cost a lot of money. So again, that's just my experience.
And Joseph, you and I had a conversation about the concept of strategic capacity rather than, the power of the concept of strategic capacity as compared to other alternatives, including the zero alternative.
I mean, especially for people that are, like Steve, Steve is dealing in M&A world, and a lot of us are exit planners and stuff like that. At the end of the day, the buyer wants to know, where can this company go? So you're not only working on the valuation and the increase in value of the company so that the current owner can extract value from the transaction, but the buyer also has, a view of what can be done with the company too, without doing too much work. For an M&A guy, that's pretty powerful, because you can turn around to, for example, if Steve produces a report from Clarity that says the strategic capacity is, let's say, $12 million, and it's sitting at $6 million now. So that gives someone who's in M&A world a lot of strength to go back to a potential buyer and say, look, this is where the company is. The valuation is pretty close. It's, within, let's say, high single digits of what the value is. So won't spend too much time bargaining or arguing about it. At the same time, here's the upside opportunity. If you bring in your skills and capabilities on the acquisition, this is what can be done with the company. So it makes for a better, quicker M&A transaction, a better quality M&A transaction, puts everybody in the same boat. Everyone is clear about what's going on in the company. So there's a lot of value that's added, there as well. I'm an M&A guy, by the way.
If you're transactional as an M&A person, you want a low value for the company so that there's great opportunity for the buyer to do something. And if
Not
you're
necessarily.
transactional, you don't get any work once
No.
the buyer buys it.
No, I don't agree with you, because 80% of the transactions don't happen because, and Steve can answer, a lot of them don't happen because the buyer and the seller can't come to an agreed price. They're all, each one is looking to say, and I think there was a frequent report or
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
recently, right? So this helps bridge that gap, because it's something that everyone can look at and agree on, because you've got some moderator, so to speak, which could be NACVA or some valuation that works in the middle to help everybody come to a meeting ground.
What were you going to say, Steve? You're on mute.
You're on mute, yeah.
Hate that.
I pretty much agree with Joseph's comment, but on the last point that you made, Paul, the M&A guy or gal is incentivized to make the number as big as possible, since their success fee is going to be based on that. And the other factor is that it gets back to the risk thing we were talking about. For the most part, buyers don't pay for what they're going to do. They only pay for what you already did. But they feel better about writing the check if they can see a way to, life is going to be better, and
Exactly
they're
right.
going to get a return.
I definitely agree that the M&A person is incentivized to make the transfer price as high as possible. But what I've typically seen, and when I talk with M&A people, they don't want to deal with a company 5 years before it's ready to sell. They want to deal in the 12 months when it's ready for sale and it sells. So they're not interested in doing the time and effort that we're talking about with trying to improve the capacity.
Yeah,
They're
you're,
very transactional was what
If
I
you're
was.
strictly an M&A person, you're 100% right.
yeah, and I would agree with you, Paul, but let's be, but I think it's worth adding one little comment over here, and that is, no buyer wants to spend 6 months and tens of thousands of dollars doing due diligence before he decides that a deal is worth getting into. This gives the M&A guy an additional tool to quickly represent the status of the company and the quality of the deal to a buyer, that if the numbers are high enough, it suggests to them this is a deal worth doing due diligence on. And this is a deal that meets your needs and your metrics for whether it's an EBITDA or the capacity to grow or whatever, some type of return that you're trying to get out, like a private equity buyer.
Then if that's the case, I would advise George that he should be trying to sell this to private equity and family offices so that they can use it to help look at their stuff.
So I don't know.
One of
I
our
don't know. I
colleagues,
don't know if it would be private equity. Private equity is a little bit different, and family office is also a little bit different because they're doing, mostly LBO modeling for their transactions. But I think for an M&A guy, it's definitely valuable for him to be able to vet potential deals that even he would take on as a client. Because if the strategic capacity is very low, it means the quality of the company is low. Don't waste your time taking the deal.
one of our colleagues, Michael Poole, who parachutes into conferences periodically, does just that.
Yeah.
That's what I do also for the M&A guys I work with. I actually vet their clients for them, or potential clients for them, to say them, these are probably the best deals and these are the ones that I can work with for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are three. Thank you, Joseph. There are three stripes, right? There are people who are ready for a deal right now, very few, but they're there. They're out there. And then there are the companies. There's a pretty broad set of companies. And Joseph, I'd love your comments on this, that are not deal ready, but they're close. They're low hanging fruit, right? And give them a year or 2, 3 years of working hard, and we might be able to drive that, get them to the table successfully, get them across the line successfully, and at significantly higher value. And then there's the, why don't we look for a different solution for you rather than M&A set? But Hey, Barry and Jeff, I finally figured out how to get this thing. I've not done this on my iPad in a long time to get this on. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Mr. Ketchum, great to see you.
Likewise, I'm on a iPad in the car too. So, hey, this has been a great conversation. I'm taking a lot of value and things I can implement away from this call.
Excellent. Excellent. These are fun conversations. There are a couple of meetings a week I really look forward to, and this is at the top of the stack. This free form. These are great. These are absolutely great. Thank you, Jeff.
Just on that point that was just made, the prior was clarity fits right into an exit planning engagement.
Yes.
Because most of the time the business has to grow to meet the needs of the owner. And so here's a tool to help you do that.
Yeah. You know, and in a video I put out, I think last week, you know, I say exit planning, schmexit planning. I'm on record, and I'll say it again right now. The exit plan is arguably the most important strategic plan out there. However, you guys uniformly report that when you say the word exit, there are very few clients. You're really niching yourself. It's really a long tail play, right? And but if we talk about equity value planning and planning for the future value of your business, it seems to me is a very different conversation. And that's the conversation we want to have. Now, you can define what future is. Future can be, 5 minutes from now or 5 years from now. But planning for the equity value, taking responsibility for and action on the equity value of your business is something that you should do as a CEO. And what we lose, and I'm getting back on my soapbox, but a business with high transferable value has predictable cash flow, right? Has the promise, a high transferable value has the promise, I'm not getting into strategic, has the promise of future growth, right? Gets high confidence in future growth, has a record of growing. That's a sexy company. And it seems to me that it checks a lot of boxes for our clients. The concept of transferable value, transferable is probably the most important word. Whether or not someone wants to ever transfer that value, right? Okay, I'm off my soapbox again.
No one's probably interested in this, but just in the oh by the way category. John Denny, who runs Exit Map,
Yep.
gave a presentation last week on the National Survey of Exit Planners, which was interesting. But one of the comments he made is, I forget, I'm going to paraphrase, but obviously 100% of all business owners leave their business. So don't be afraid of using the word exit. It's true. And I read his recent book over the weekend, and he made several pages on use the word exit. Now, I think it's the case of being the pedestrian that's got run over when he or she was going in the crosswalk. They had the right of way, but they're still dead. So I think he's technically correct, but I think from a marketing and messaging standpoint, maybe exit's not the best word.
And then we're getting into phraseology because it's ultimately the distinct. How would you guys distinguish? I don't know if we want to. We've already been going in almost an hour, so maybe I won't drop this into the middle of the fish pond. But there's an interesting debate to be had, and the difference between the discipline of exit planning, right, and selecting or really deselecting exit options until we come up with the one or two that are best, and everything that goes along with that. And what we're talking about, which is working on the equity value of your business, the purposeful, predictable value of your business. And probably, Barry, I love your thoughts on this, but your exit path, if any, will impact, there are different values at through different exit paths. So, but all of that's.
Yeah, just
we
an
lost clarity, but
editorial comment. An exit plan is not exit implementation. So
That's
you can look at clarity as both an assessment tool, which would be part of an exit plan. But then you can continue to use clarity to be part of the implementation activity.
yeah.
Well,
You know-
clarity can be used for clarity can be used for a number of different purposes. I mean, it could be for pre-due diligence, it could be for due diligence, it could be for the exit plan, it could be for growth, it could be equity value, it could be whatever you want it to be, and how you're going to market yourself individually in a particular situation. I think it's a wonderful tool to be used for that.
Yeah.
George developed a chameleon.
Yeah, I never talk about exit planning. I think the growth conversation, or the moniker strategic capacity to grow or growth, is the shiny object for the owner to engage the conversation. For me, it's about risk management. I mean, for most people that we speak with, this is their number one financial asset. It's typically, if not 10 times, maybe even 50 or 50x of every other asset they have, combined. And people will do more to avoid pain than to increase pleasure. And having the conversation of, you spend a life building this asset, you want to manage the risk of the downside. And I think COVID has, brought that really to the forefront, and we should leverage it, because we're also, not because we want to manipulate our clients, because we're doing them a service by helping them manage downside risk of an asset they've spent their entire lifetime building.
Yes.
And I think that will convert them to work with you much quicker than it's going to be about add an extra 50 grand or 100 grand or 200 grand to, to their cash flow. Nice, but they've got other things going on in their life. But, make sure they don't lose their 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million, whatever, $5 million company they spent a life building, that usually has a pretty good impact in a conversation.
As Larry raised his hand earlier, I'm going to do it too, but you got to shake it back and forth. So I gotta go, guys.
Okay, yeah, I actually, we're coming up on, I have to run too. Guys, great conversation. Thank you very much. Great conversation. Anybody final thoughts before we sign off? I should ask for key takeaways, right?
Keep doing your thing, George.
Thank you, Steve. And guys, you'll see, I'll post in the community. We'll do a tour of Clarity, the whole shebang, probably on Thursday. And so very cool. Thank you, guys. Fun conversation. I really appreciate it. Have a great week. Okay. Hey, Joe, I didn't know you were there. Have a great week, man.